Boston, the winningest sports city this century. Each championship deriving from a plan. Join us as we discuss the next Boston Banner Blueprint with your hosts, Josh Finkel, Nick Walsh, and Nate Philbrook.
What's up, and welcome back to the Boston Banner Blueprint podcast. This is your boy Fink. I'm here with Nate and Nick. Tony C's behind the glass on the ones and twos. It's episode 10. We've got a very special guest joining us. It's Brett Chaves. He's the play-by-play voice of the Providence Bruins. So we're going to be diving into everything Providence Bruins, how their season is shaping up, key prospects to watch, and of course, how their pipeline connects to the blueprint for the Boston Bruins. Plus, we'll get Brett's insights on his broadcasting journey and what it's like calling games at the AHL level. Before we bring Brett on, I'm going to send it over to Nate so he can tell you where to find us.
Absolutely. As we start every episode, we're going to start with exactly where to find us on our social media. And of course, that starts on Twitter/X at Boston Banner BP. Boy, we've got a lot of new followers there, so keep that rolling. Boston Banner Blueprint on both Facebook and Instagram. And then you can listen to this episode and all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. So let's welcome our guest and start talking some hockey.
Yeah, so let's welcome Brett Chaves to the show. Brett, what's going on? Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you here.
Yeah, so I think I'll go for it, Nick. That's perfect.
Yeah, I was going to say, welcome to the show. Wanted to start you off with basically an easy softball question for you to get this thing rolling. What led you to a career in broadcasting, man?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, honestly, it kind of just developed over time with my transition to not just the love for the game and just all sports, but kind of understanding the fact that, like, I was not nearly as athletic as probably about 80% of my high school class. I mean, I was probably in a high school class of about 600 people, and 20 of them were going to make varsity squad for baseball. Knew I was not going to do it. So I kind of stayed involved with the game in a different way, and that was just broadcasting. I started there in high school, eventually worked my way to college, found my way through Dean. And here we are. Got a couple really cool opportunities and made some good ties with people up in Boston and in Providence. And I'm really grateful and fortunate to be where I am right now.
So I mean, that's kind of your start to the sports world. But let's hear how you actually found your way to Providence and what that journey's been like.
Yeah, that's a good question. This kind of happened 2-3 years ago, I'd say, about now. So the full-time play-by-play announcer, Austin Rook, at the time, he had reached out to me. He was connected to me through his father, John Rook, who, if you're not familiar with John, play-by-play for Friars basketball. He's been doing it for almost 30 years. He's been the man at the amp for decades now. And so when Austin was named full-time play-by-play of the Bruins, he was kind of looped in at Dean. So this was about my sophomore year of college, and I got a Twitter DM from Austin. He said, "Hey, looking to scale back a little bit. We want to give some opportunities to some Dean students, and you and one other person at the time, were first on his list." He's like, "Do you want to call a game? I have this availability at this date. It's opening night. What do you think?" And obviously, 20-year-old me at the time jumped on it in a heartbeat. I mean, it's not often you get to go right from the NAHL to the AHL in college. I mean, I was getting an opportunity that very few people, get to receive. And I was very, cognizant and, grateful for that opportunity. As things developed over time, I called some more games, kind of jumped into the pile a little bit more. And Austin and I are basically 1A, 1B now, full time in the broadcast booth for Providence. So he'll call about 50%. I'll call about 50%, give or take. But I'm really grateful to be there. It has definitely been a once in a lifetime opportunity to call games from up there.
Would you say that's now like the second best thing that's ever happened? Now, of course, being replaced by being on the Boston Banner Blueprint podcast.
That's a really good point, Nate.
That's a
really
great
good point.
I'd say so. I think that's a valid statement. I'm glad to be with you boys, but yeah, that just made me chuckle. That's a good one.
I try. I
Now-
know you've been waiting to ask your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one for you, Brett. What's the biggest challenge of calling an AHL game?
I will say immediately off the bat, the hardest thing that I had to recognize was the speed of the game. Every tier that you go up in hockey, not even just play, but just broadcasting, there's an increase in speed of how this game is played. So I started at the NA 3HL level, which is probably about 17, 18-year-old kids. It's a fast game. Then you're jumping up to like 19 and 20-year-olds. The game gets faster. You got to pick up your player recognitions, your numbers, who's on the back of the sweater, what penalties happening, what goal happened at this time, whatever. The play gets faster. Going from the NAL to the AHL, I mean, picture like taking a remote and just pressing fast forward like 5 times. Like that's basically what my mind was trying to process at that moment. I mean, you'd see the puck in the neutral zone. Next thing you know, it's in the back of the net. I mean, these guys were tic-tac-toe, lights out. It's probably as pro as you can get without being the NHL, which is exactly what the American Hockey League is designed to be. It's basically your highest tier of minor league pro play. So it took me, honestly, a full year to really understand the nature and the design of the play and sort of how the Providence system was operating, what their strategy was. We'll get into this in a moment, but they're really big on perimeter hockey and crashing up front. They love to build a bruiser mentality and to stay confident in the crease. So it really took me a full year to kind of register that was what they were trying to build based off of the prospect pool that they had. And then from there, I could build my broadcast style, sort of build how I registered players, and then adjust to the speed of the game.
Now, with
I'm
those
going to say this
challenges
in the most. Hold on, Nick. I got a quick follow-up question to that. As I'm going to say this in the most loving way possible to my fellow co-host here, Nick. But there are some areas of opportunity to improve on name pronunciation. Do you have any tips for any of these names that you're seeing out of the AHL or even the NHL, for that matter, of how to pronounce them?
A good friend of mine that I met in the NAL, I'll name drop him here, Jake Baskin. Jake, if you're watching, appreciate you. A lot of it stems from their country of descent, if they are international based. So obviously, for those that don't know hockey, a lot of the player pool and the roster pile is actually built internationally. Finns, Swedes, Czech, Slovaks, Russians, Canadians, everything. It's not just the United States. It's honestly a really cool thing to witness because it's the one professional sport that's played in the U.S. where international prospects is the majority. U.S. play is actually smaller than both basketball, baseball, and obviously football. So understanding the name roots from those international countries will help you along with your pronunciations. So if they're French Canadian descent, an ET is like an A. So Freddie Brunet on the Bruins instead of Brunette, it's Brunet because you're enunciating that ET like a long A. Just trying to think of some other ones here. Obviously, like Slovaks, Czechs, Russians, they use the Z predominantly. Obsky is a big one in Russian. You're going to see that a lot, especially at the pro level. Some of them have letters with special marks on top, like the double dot over the O. That's really big in Scandinavia, the Finns, the Swedes, the Norwegians. It's honestly just understanding the countries and understanding those pronunciations, how the name roots derive, and then kind of just using your context clues to figure out the pronunciation. If you're new to the game, obviously, if you're within the organization, just ask your media guy or just straight up go to the player. That's my easiest play. But those are probably the two biggest ones.
Sounds like you better get started on the old studying, Nick.
Yeah, basically. But the question I was going to ask you about is with all the challenges of learning how to be a play-by-play guy and all that, the names that Bruins fans at home listening to this would know, like the Jack Edwards, the Andy Brickleys, Judd Surratt. Do any of those guys reach down to you guys in the AHL to give pointers or guidance to you as you go along this journey in Providence?
It's so funny you say that because for the last couple of years, I've had contact with Judd, Brick, Jack, all those guys up in Boston. I got nothing but respect for them. Those guys are high class. They treat everything up there with 1,000% professionalism, and they are on point always. And they've always given me pointers on how to continue my game, especially Jack and Judd. Those guys definitely know how to prepare and how to set themselves up for success every single game. It's extremely impressive. I had a conversation with Jack this past January, it was last year. He sat down with me and basically just went through what his blueprint is. How he prepares. It's fascinating to learn from every single person because obviously it's a play-by-play. No person is going to be identical to the other because everyone prepares in a different manner. There's not a cookie cutter way to do it. It's whatever you're most comfortable with and what you think is going to make you succeed. And just learning those tips from those three guys and how they prepare has kind of helped me adjust my own style and becoming successful at the next level and hopefully one day making it to where they are.
So we're sitting here in February. Obviously, the AHL season is well underway. Just give a quick little recap of where the Providence Bruins are and some things that have stuck out to you to date.
So as of right now, we're moving into the final 3 months of the regular season. The Bruins, I will say, are a younger roster than what we've seen in years previous. General manager Evan Gold has obviously gone out and, signed and traded for some veteran guys to help this prospect pool develop. But this is the first time in a little while that we've seen, management let the young guys develop and let them get their minutes and let them get that quality experience. Guys that you normally see in the ECHL, like Ryan Mast, Brett Harrison, even right now, Freddie Brunet, who started the year last season in the ECHL. Those guys are getting multitude of minutes right now because they're trying to build that young core up to be strong defensemen, strong forwards on the bottom six line. And it's worked out very well to this point in time. They got up to a slow start. They're among the bottom of their division. In the American Hockey League, a lot of your success is based on divisional play, very similar to the NHL. So Providence was about 6-7 in the Atlantic. Now they're up to third, and they're basically just in a massive crapshoot between Charlotte, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Hershey for second and first place in the division to see who ends up getting into that number one spot into the play-in tournament in the AHL for the Calder Cup. As of right now, they're third. They're right behind Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and they are tied with Charlotte in the Checkers. But the big thing right now for the Bruins is honestly just the way the top six forwards have kind of molded in the chemistry they've developed. We'll get into some guys specifically in a moment, but veteran guys like Tyler Pitlick, Vinny Lettieri, Jeffrey VL, who they signed from Manitoba this past season, guys that were designed to be leaders to help these young guys up, are honestly starting to take bigger leaps for themselves and really be key contributors on the top six line. So it's impressive to see how both sides of the coin have developed and how they've gone from seventh in the division, sixth, seventh, all the way up to second and third, and they're looking to seriously play a good bid into the Calder Cup tournament.
Now, Brett, with that big jump that they've had and from where they were at the beginning of the year, what would you say some of their weaknesses were at the beginning and some of their strengths of getting them out of that to where they are now?
Sure.
I know you mentioned age and they were younger, but
no,
to
expand
question on that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the two biggest things were turnovers and the back check on defense. Obviously, when you're young and you haven't had that much experience in the American Hockey League, turnovers are going to be an issue because you're still adjusting to the speed of play. Something that's going to work through three guys and find its way over the blue line is now being picked off by the defense and getting into a 2-on-1 situation. So it's going to take time for those guys to adjust. And I think everybody in the building knew that it was going to take some time, for some of these younger guys to get acquainted to the speed, which they did. And I will give them 1,000% credit on, because it's been extremely impressive to watch that turnaround in such a short period of time. So I'd say turnovers are one of the biggest things. The other, like I mentioned, was just the back check on defense. Some of these guys that, are now playing second, third pair on defense, are trying to get used to the physicality that, maybe a few of these veterans are getting acquainted to. And so now you have a situation where, a veteran's going to outplay you to the puck, and they're going to play more physical than you, and they're going to dominate inside of the crease. So now you have to be more mentally aware of your situation. Say, hey, maybe I do have to play more physical inside of the corners and by the blue line, so that way I can force an opportunity back to the neutral zone and to the other side of the ice. Brunet, Mast, Sweezy, these guys that have come in and, struggled in the beginning half of the season have now turned it around and flipped the coin. So now you're seeing them have plus ratings and a lot more physical and clean play on the back check to give the Bruins better overall defensive play. So I'd say those two things were a struggle in the beginning, but they've quickly picked it up.
Do you have any key games or moments so far in the season that have kind of shaped where they are now?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was just it wasn't necessarily a moment, but more of a period of time. Seeing Mark McLaughlin go on a 6-game goal streak and just kind of give that top 6 forward mixture some confidence, I think was huge for the team. Because at that point in time, they were looking for kind of a spark. They didn't really have anything on offense. They were just kind of playing the puck around, seeing what's stuck in front of the crease. It was a different feel. So when McLaughlin kind of went on that streak and they saw that they could have life again, it just kind of it brought a new meaning to the attack. And then you saw guys like Lettieri heat up again. You saw Merkulov come back into the equation. When Matthew Pochra got sent down to Providence and added that mixture to the core lines, that was a huge help. So from when McLaughlin started, it was about a week and a half stretch where he kind of went on that tear. I'd say that's what really turned it around for the Bruins and kind of gave them that confidence heading into 2025 in the new year.
So you mentioned on the previous question some of the stylistic differences, but when you were really breaking down, I think it's probably fair to say that most of our listeners tend to lean more NHL fans, or at least what they're watching on a more regular basis. What would you say is the biggest difference between the NHL and the AHL game? Because we know that it is two different styles of play.
Well, the AHL is specifically designed for prospect development and to be a channel to the NHL. Obviously, it's an extremely high level of play, and you're going to get some extreme pros down there. But the ultimate purpose of the American Hockey League is to develop your top prospects and to serve as a channel to the NHL. And I think that's where you see some of the key differences. A lot of times teams will shape their offense to kind of mold to those prospects and their style, so that way they can get their opportunities. And then veterans who maybe don't necessarily see themselves getting a lot of opportunity in the NHL will help those kids in the American Hockey League get their opportunities. They'll develop a higher rating, on defense to make sure that they're getting their passes up front and to make sure these kids are getting good goals and good shots on net. It's just more focused to develop the prospect as opposed to the NHL, where you're designed to build top 12 forwards, top 6 defense, and go win hockey games every night. A lot more coaching staffs, they're going to win and they want to win, but at the end of the day, they want to help those prospects develop as much as possible and get that channel to the NHL. And so sometimes winning may not be the top priority. Sometimes it's just making sure that kid gets an opportunity. Both leagues are extremely high pro, like I mentioned before, but at the end of the day, you're looking to develop your top guys.
Now, in the sense of developing those top guys, which of the Providence Bruins players, maybe not so much the names that Bruins fans have heard, like the Fabian Lysels who've come up and got their cup of coffee so far, or Mason Lohrei or Matty Poitras, but which other players are closest to making that NHL jump from Providence to Boston potentially down the road, maybe this year or start of next year, so to speak?
It's tough to gauge because Providence is at an interesting standpoint right now where at the end of last season, they signed about 6 to 7 guys right out of college, and they knew they needed some work, right? These are guys they drafted in the 5th, 6th round of the NHL draft, and they wanted to give them some quality time in the American Hockey League. So there's this 2-year span where you're kind of giving them the opportunity to develop and then hopefully make that jump to the NHL level. Obviously, you mentioned guys like Lysell and Lorai, guys that, you know, obviously are the focal point for the Boston prospect system, but they're going to get their minutes in the NHL no matter what. They're almost guaranteed. But at this stage, you're looking at guys like Georgi Merkulov. You're looking at guys like Mikey DiPietro and Brandon Bussey in goal, who are solid goaltenders in the AHL. And now that you have maybe just a single guy in Jeremy Swayman in net, maybe you give one of those youngsters a shot behind him to be the number 2 goaltender in Boston. And then you have the younger tier guys. Maybe it takes another year or 2 for them to develop, and they get their chance in Boston. I could see someone like Freddie Brunet, if he puts on some more size and continues his clean play, I could see him being a factor for Boston in the next few years. John Farinacci, Harvard guy, extremely clean offensively, and he knows how to play every line to the distinction. I've seen him on the 4th line. I've seen him as high as the 1st line. He played on the 1st line this past Friday and worked very well with Lettieri and Merkulov. He's another guy. Someone like Riley Duran, who signed this past offseason from PC, the Friars. He has made significant strides in development, and I could see him in Boston in another 2 to 3 years. So, like I said, there's a gap now where they're too young to make that NHL leap from my eyes. But you never know, where strides can lead, not only in the next 3 months, but going into camp next year. You never know.
I love the Mikey DiPietro shout out there. Put out a tweet about him. Nick did not like it. He's a big fan of having a good backup goalie that we have right now.
No, he's miscommunicating. What he called the current Bruins backup goalie subpar, and I pushed back saying Korpisalo has played to more than what we expected coming into the year. So that was the only sticking point. So Finkel's kind of putting words into my mouth, but we'll leave it at that and we'll move on. Is there any surprise players who could be future NHL contributors? Like, not the names that you just mentioned, but guys that are not on the radar that you could see making that big jump that you were leaning towards?
I think that's a great question, and I think it goes back to a player that I just mentioned. I think the biggest surprise, especially this year, is Freddie Brunet. Not many people had him on their radar going into this year, but now that he's had almost a full season of play in the American Hockey League, it's extremely impressive with not only the strides that he's made, but how clean of an effort he's put on. I mean, I talked about this in our broadcast on Friday. He's got a +8 rating through his last 10 games. I mean, that's extremely impressive for not only how young he is, but the type of player that he came out of in the QMJHL. It's very hard to make that kind of transition, and he's done it very, very solid. I'm impressed with the efforts that he's put in this year. I could see somebody like a Riley Tufte go back to the NHL. We've seen him do it before with the Avalanche. I could see him doing it again. The guy's 6'6". I mean, you don't see guys like that, go back into the NHL often. And I think with his speed and if he cleans up his game a little bit, you could see him back there. I could see guys like Brett Harrison maybe getting a shot if he's able to clean up his game a little bit. He took a regression a little bit in minutes this year, just because of the surprises like we saw from Duran and Pitlick, having Tufte back in the mixture. It's been a little bit of a grind for Harrison, but I think if he cleans it up, I think he'll be back in the mixture and potentially back up in Boston. And I think the surprise that a lot of people aren't seeing, but could be a shocker in the next few years, I'd probably give it about 3. Is Jackson Edward. Very similar to Brunet, came out of the Ontario system, came out of Canada. This is someone that was very raw in his development and his game, but he's made quick stride, and having him paired with someone like Billy Sweezy or someone like Michael Callahan, a veteran on the other side of the defensive pair, has helped this game a lot. And he's learned very fast of how this AHL effort is played. And so I've been impressed with both him and Brunet, and the ability they've been able to create and transition from the Ontario, QMJ, OHL systems all the way up to the AHL.
So those are a little bit, I would say, deeper cuts, and certainly love the insight there. Now, as Bruins fans, we've heard about Fabian Lysell, we've heard about Merkelov for a long time. How are these guys' games progressing? How are they continuing to grow? And what would be your insight into their games?
It's a tough point for both of them right now because they're both very offensive centric players, but you're now fighting an NHL affiliate that's very defensive heavy. Boston's someone that's always been prominent on playing physical, win your matchup, get underneath. For Faves and for Merck, these are guys that pride their game on being fast, getting to the puck first, getting breakaway odd number situations. So I will never discount their game because of how talented both of them are. But it's a situation where sometimes their style of play doesn't fit the system that Boston is necessarily working at. And with Faves in particular, he's had to adjust his game over time. His first 2 years in the AHL, he was so focused on getting every single goal that came his way and every single shot that was in front of him, and it turned into turnovers. There were just some situations that just weren't clean. But I'll give him a lot of credit. He came into this year, worked on his game, adjusted a lot, and he is now pass heavy. He's got more assists this year than he does goals. In fact, I think it's almost double the amount of assists than he does goals this year. And he has been a key contributor in the passing game for the Bruins in the perimeter. So I will give him a lot of credit in the way he's adjusted. And the same way for Merck. Obviously, Merck is very heavy on the wings, and he's a very one-time heavy player. They'll work him on the power play. They'll feed the perimeter and try to get it to Merck for a quick shot and a goal behind the pipes. But for him, it's just, making sure you're continuing to be pass heavy, staying physical, win your matchups, get up front, for a team like Boston that needs to play physical. For Merck as well, size has always never really been on his side. He is a little bit smaller compared to some other people, in Boston. But he's never let that become a factor for him. He's always played physical, and I think you're finally starting to see him jump over that hurdle of, how can I clean up my game and fit Boston's mold to, all right, I am now fighting the game that Boston's playing. I'm just waiting for my opportunity to get that call. And I think, especially with this roster Boston's working with, you're going to see that call in the next 12 months, especially long-term for Merck.
And you mentioned the roster with the Boston Bruins right about now, and Cam and Don have made the comment where this trade deadline, they kind of have those two paths that they can go. They can make one more push really with this core, or they can take the other route and start over. And if they take that path, obviously the pipeline in Providence is going to play a huge part bringing guys up. You get to be around these guys and see them day in and day out, and you get to see other teams of the AHL come in, and we all hear Don Sweeney has never lived down the 2015 draft. The stick on him is he can't develop players, to say so. But from your perspective, how strong is the Bruins prospect pool compared to the rest of the league?
I think the Bruins prospects pool is a lot stronger than what people give it credit for. I just think the talent level is not drafted as high as, some other teams in the American Hockey League. I mean, the Bruins prospect pool is going up against guys that are consistently drafted 10th and 11th overall in the National Hockey League. I mean, it's not often 12 times a year we get to see Dalibor Dvorsky, who was drafted in the top 10 this past year for the Blues, and he's now playing for Springfield, and we get to face him 12 times a year. Denton Mateychuk for Cleveland, who was just drafted top 5 in the Blue Jacket system. We get to see him, 4 times a year. The Bruins have always been a strong roster in the last decade and a half, so you're not going to be drafting high up in the boards. These are going to be guys that are drafted in the mid-20s, and, they're more raw prospects, and they need time to develop. So you're not going to get the love that, some lower-tier NHL franchises are going to get, and now they have this huge prospect pool in the AHL. it's a different situation, and I think people need to take that into consideration. At least looking at Providence aside, I think there's obviously still work to be done, like any AHL team. But like I said earlier, this is a young roster, and for the strides that they've taken in the last 12 months is extremely impressive. And I think if you give this team 2 more years without prematurely calling them up, I think you're going to see some serious talent, come from Providence to Boston in the short term, and especially with guys like we talked about, Merck, Fabes, even Lowry, and the guys that have already got their chances up there.
Obviously, he's not in the system yet in terms of playing at your level, but have you seen much in the Latorno season so far this year of how he might fit in?
I haven't seen much out of, Latorno this year. The big focus for Boston and Providence right now has obviously been the, developing the guys that are in house and then worrying about the new prospects when they are signed and sealed. But I do think that Latorno, once he's in the building, is going to be a key contributor to this team. And, wherever Muj and wherever this management sees him fit, they're going to make it work. And, Muj has done a great job to that standpoint up until now. And I got no doubts that he's going to do it once Latorno's in the building.
So shifting gears from the AHL, Brett, I think it's time to talk a little bit about the Boston Bruins. So let's have a quick overview of the Boston Bruins from your perspective so far.
Yeah, so I guess my take on Boston right now is, you're kind of at a tweener crossroads stage right now where, this is the back end of your core that has supported you the last 2 decades. And, you've got to make a decision whether or not you want to stick with Marchand and, some of your older defensive guys that have been an everyday player in the building. Do you stick with them and finish it out? Or do you try to start fresh and really build something from the ground up? And I think that's the hard decision that both Cam Neely and Don Sweeney have to make right now. Obviously, I'm in no position to make that decision or to even talk about it, but I think it's important for people to realize that, just because the Bruins are in first place in the Atlantic now doesn't mean that this roster is bad. This is still a solid roster that could make a potential push in the NHL playoffs. We've seen crazier happen. I mean, look at the Florida Panthers 2 years ago. They were in the same exact spot Boston's in right now, and they ended up going all the way to the Stanley Cup final. I mean, in the world of hockey, anything is possible. It all just depends on how hot the team gets at the right moment. So I wouldn't say, put your worry jackets on or, get your buttons into a knot. This is a situation where this team needs more time, and, you're going to see that chemistry develop over time. It's just a matter of, can the guys band together and, what can Joe Sacco, put together moving into the month of April.
And I like how you brought up the Florida example, which that obviously as Bruins fans bring up pain for us from 2022, 2023. But another example would have been another painful reminder, the 2019 Blues, who I believe at this point were out of the playoff picture. They had fired their coach and they start their rookie goaltender in Binnington, and they go on this hot streak, and 3 months later, they're NHL champions celebrating on our ice, which it's a painful reminder, but it's where the Bruins are right now. It's not out of the question, not impossible if you're looking at the glass half full perspective.
When you have a goaltender that's a top 5 netminder, not 5 or 4, Jeremy Swayman is a special talent. And when you've got a guy like that between the pipes, I'd say a solid 4 defensemen to really help build your core, I think you've got something to work with. The biggest question for them now is how are you going to develop your top 6 forwards and complement veterans that maybe are looking out the door in the next year or so, like Marchand. How are you going to complement Pasternak, a guy that's your superstar in the building, but he needs pieces to work around and people to feed him the puck. That's your biggest question moving not only into the spring, but moving into camp next year. And I think those are some of the answers that you're going to be finding, especially in the Providence pipeline moving forward.
Yeah, and love that Swayman call out, University of Maine product. Go Black Bears. So you just mentioned those 3 examples with the 2 Florida teams and the St. Louis Blues. the thing that they have in common with this current Bruins roster, in my opinion, is their style of hockey much better correlates to playoff hockey rather than regular season hockey. They're not the team that's going to go out and just skate like no tomorrow and just skate around you. And then when come playoff time, just get pushed off the puck. This is a pretty hard-nosed team, a team that, to your point, plays very physically, wins the puck, plays a little dirty in the corners, and then ultimately likes that style of play. So, I mean, that's what my takeaway would be there of that comment is those three teams. So basically, we're making a Stanley Cup run, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
I was going to say, especially if Charlie McAvoy is hitting guys like he hit McDavid the other night in the USA-Canada game.
I have got to admit, that was a ruthless hit. I saw that in real time, and I was like, oh, all right, Mac's here to play.
Is it sad that my first thought was, where the hell has this been for the last few years? We need this guy back.
There's been talk a while for Mac, maybe getting, a game or two there in Providence just to make sure he gets his proper rehab. But, he has been a special talent in Boston for years. And I think that this defense is critical in developing around him. But to flip the other side of the coin around, you need to make sure that Charlie's healthy. And that's been an issue, especially for him the last 3 years. So if he's able to stay healthy, especially in the next 3 months during a cup run, and you're able to complement him with other healthy guys like Zadorov and Lohrei, I think this team has a potential to play very physical hockey and potentially make a 2-round, 3-round run, in the Stanley Cup.
There's nothing that makes you want to, lay the boomstick more than playing for your father-in-law. What's
All
up,
right,
BT?
Tony.
I think it's time for Tony's 2-minute drill. Let me walk you through, Brett, and anyone else that's listening, what this is. I can ask any random question. Doesn't have to be about sports. It can be about anything, history, some random fact. I'll give you an example of what we used last week. Last week I asked, what's the longest someone has ever held their breath underwater? And I had these guys write down the time. And the first person that was closest to it got the point. And that was Nick last week. The real time is 24 minutes for anyone wondering at home. But today's question, not going to involve any writing down. I'm going to go based on who I see put their finger up first with the answer, okay? You guys understand? You ready to go?
Ready to go.
Ready.
I guess so.
All right. What American sportswear company was originally called Blue Ribbon Sports?
Blue Ribbon?
Fink's got a guess.
Under Armour?
It is not Under Armour. I think you are negative a point now.
What?
Oh, it goes negative. I take that finger back. I take that finger back then because I'm not too confident in my answer.
Nick, you got no guesses? Brett,
I'm going to go Reebok.
Reebok? Negative a point.
I'll take a stab. Is it Bauer?
It is not.
I like how you went with the hockey theme, which
I had to. Blue Ribbon Bauer just kind of stuck in my head.
Nick goes up 2 points on that we're canceling this segment.
I'm going to just go with not so much the obvious answer, but probably the most popular menswear, Nike.
He's right. Nick's right.
There's no way there's no way it's that obvious.
Let's go.
Yep,
This is ridiculous.
Wow.
This is ridiculous. He's done.
Let's
All right, let's
go.
get back to the hockey.
I call
Let's
absolute
get back to the
BS
hockey.
now.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Tony, that's awful. That's awful.
That's a
Tony.
that's a 2 point swing. So I'm up 3. If I'm at 2 and you guys are at -1.
Oh
I think
my!
this whole working together thing has not worked out so far.
This is awful. This is awful. Nike, really? Come on.
Ouch.
That was just a total guess that I pulled out of my rear end.
Mr.
So
Knight failed us
I
on
guess,
that one.
Brett, diving back into it, are there any? I know we've talked a lot about the Providence Bruins, a lot of names. Are there any of those group of names that you could see getting called up late this year to help this Boston Bruins team make a stretch run?
I think you're going to see two guys potentially get the call. And I think we talked about this, a little bit ago. I think you're going to see Merck. I think Georgi Merkulov, depending on health, is going to get the call. It's just a matter of when. And I think you're going to see Michael Callahan get recalled. Michael Callahan was kind of in that weird situation where he got brought up, but because he didn't hit the 10-game mark, he didn't have to go back on conditional waivers. They just sent him back down to Providence. So I think once you hit that stretch in March and April, you're going to get to see Callie back up with the Bruins because he's someone that they have prioritized a lot in their development over the last 3 seasons. And he has really molded his game to the style of Boston's playing at. And he could be a serious contributor for puck movement moving into the playoff time.
Where do you see those guys slotting in?
I think you're going to see Merck on the fourth line, especially at center. Merck has played wing in Providence, but for some reason, Boston loves him at center. He's played center and right wing a little bit in the Boston organization. So I think you're going to see him there, just trying to be the focal point of those passes up in front because Merck's someone that's going to get these shot opportunities, just a matter of where. For Callie especially, I think you're going to see him either on the second pair or the third pair on defense. Obviously, he's not going to be the top with McAvoy and such, but I could see him being someone that's a rotational piece and getting some minutes on that bottom defensive pair.
If you were to pick one of the goalies with Bussy and forgive me for Mikey's last name that I'm not remembering, but
Pietro.
Thank you. Do you see them slotting in as a goalie too, either this year or years to come?
Because of Stanley Cup playoff situations, I think you're going to see DiPietro called up. It is strictly dependent on how Providence is doing in the playoffs as well. Because you have to remember, these playoffs coincide with each other. So if Providence needs DiPietro, who, statistically speaking, has been the best goaltender in the AHL up to this point, they're going to keep DiPietro down in Providence. Bussy's played a handful of games in Boston already. So if they need Buss, they'll call up Bussy and then bring up Ryan Bichelle from the ECHL. I could absolutely see that happening. So there's no doubt in my mind that one of them is going to get called. If Providence is out of the playoffs by the time Boston's still in, DiPietro will get the call. He has been the better of the two. There's no hands down. He deserves his shot up in the NHL. And he's already gotten 2 call-ups already this year, I believe. He just went from top 20 in the AHL for goal against and save percentage to number 1. I mean, he has had a lights out season. And honestly, I think he's getting to the point where you give him another 6 months in camp, I think he might be NHL ready, depending on Corpy's situation.
Get that guy out of here.
Yeah, Fink wants to ship him out for a bag of pucks or something.
Anything.
Now, when that day comes, when he gets called up, do you see it being like an Olmark Swayman situation from when Swayman first got the call up, where
no,
Swayman takes the that shoots that third down? I was just going to say, basically, maybe not like the 40-40 split that they got, but like that tandem goalie where you're getting a true NHL number 1 goalie night in and night out.
No, and here's why. You're paying Swayman almost $7 million a year. He's going to get top line minutes, and he's going to get top goaltender minutes. If it was a situation like they were previously where Swayman's on a rookie deal and you've got Allmark on the relatively cheap, then you can play them 1A, 1B. Then you're not really dealing with that kind of technicality. Now that you've got Swayman under that hefty deal, and he's earned that right in that respect, he's going to get the NHL minutes. Obviously, if Mikey's NHL ready and he's going to be a significant factor to this team, I think he's going to get a few more starts than Corpy has this year. I could absolutely see that happening. But now you're dealing with a situation where you've got a top 5 goaltender. He's going to be in the same category as Shesty, as Hallebuck, as Binnington, in recent memory. He's going to get the time. And Mikey's going to have to wait for his opportunities. I don't see it being a tandem anytime soon.
As if he didn't say it with enough authority the first time, Nick, but I appreciate the elaboration there.
Didn't even get the full question out of him. It was no. Which, if Swayman ends up listening to this episode, I bet he loves that answer.
He has been known to check out the Banner blueprint,
He has.
as has LeBron James after your rant.
Yeah.
Is that so? Is that actually a thing?
Oh,
No.
you gotta go check it out.
Yeah.
There is a LeBron rant, but LeBron did not see it yet.
We don't know that.
He was probably
I know
ducking it like he did the All-Star game.
Probably.
I won't go there too much. Who do you think is the most underrated player in Providence right now?
Right now, that's a great question. I think right now it's going to be Riley Durant. As of recent, his play has been cut short just because the veterans have really taken a step up, and they've been the ones to kind of get on the hot streak. But when Durant is confident and he's playing his best hockey, he's as good as any veteran on that ice, and he proved that in the month of March last year. He got on this Providence roster and immediately made an impact. I mean, he was playing top 6 forward minutes not even 2 weeks into his time in the AHL, and I find that impressive, especially for a guy like him that just made the switch from NCAA to the AHL. So I'll give Durant a lot of credit there. And I think once he gets more minutes and more experience in the top 6, I think he'll be a key component, moving forward.
Do you think there's going to be anyone moved from the AHL team at the trade deadline?
I think there's always that possibility. We've seen guys like Lou Toporowski be acquired to, go out and get, key contributors down the stretch. I think there's also potential veterans that you might move off of in the offseason. I wouldn't necessarily say now, but I think maybe in the months of June or July, you could see guys like Let's Harry and VL move on. There really is no telling that story just because, veteran status in the AHL is so fluid because a lot of guys are on 1 or 2 year deals. You're going to see guys that have spent their time in the AHL constantly get moved around unless they really are a one-trick pony for life. There are guys that devote their entire 12, 13 seasons to one team, but otherwise guys are going to get shopped around constantly. Someone like VL, he's played for 3, 4 teams. Josiah Didier, who we were talking about before the pod, he's played for like 6 or 7 teams. Sweezy's now on his 2nd team. Those guys are going to get shopped. It's just no telling when or where. You really don't know.
Speaking of trade deadline, if the Bruins decide to be buyers, where do you see their biggest need at this trade deadline?
It's tough to say because they do need a few things at this deadline, and I don't think you're going to solve all your answers right now, but I think you need to focus on your bottom 6 forwards right now. That's just been a lack of scoring all year for Boston, and I think it's going to be something that you need to prioritize, not just at this deadline, but in the offseason. How are you going to develop your Providence guys, and how are you going to supplement that with free agent signings? I think there's been some guys that you hoped in, acquiring this past off season were going to be contributors, and unfortunately they just haven't panned out. You're going to see maybe some of those guys get shopped, this next off season. You also have a couple guys, you've got to make the tough decision on, and whether or not they decide to move on them at this deadline is a mystery, but you never know. Guys like Geeky, Frederick, Kepke, these guys, they're great, but they're going to be demanding some good money, moving into this next offseason. So it's just a matter of, do you want to develop these guys and continue with their process, or do you want to move on and start something fresh, maybe a little younger? Again, I'm not in a position to make that call. I'm not Don Sweeney, but this is a situation where you've got some answers on the bottom 6, and maybe that bottom pair on defense where you're looking a little younger and AHL veteran-esque. Those are going to be your focal points moving into this deadline.
So transitioning into something a little different that we haven't done before, Brett, we're going to do a quick rapid fire round. We're going to ask you 3 or 4 questions, and we're going to see how many you can answer within about 5 minutes. So let's get it started now. What's the best Providence Bruins game you've called this season?
This season, that is a great question. We just had a 5-1 victory. I'm going to go with that one right now. That was one of my favorites, just because it was a barn burner.
Who is the player with the most NHL ready skills right now?
NHL ready skills, I would say Georgi Merkulov.
Funniest moment as broadcaster this year.
This is great. We were on the fly. It was a play in the defensive zone. Brandon Bussy's in goal. And all of a sudden, it was a 1-2-3 play in the crease. And Bussy went down to the butterfly, and all of a sudden, he spilled, on his back. And I screamed, "Oh, Bussy's down in his tuchus!" The next thing I know, this comment's going viral on Twitter. Yeah, that was definitely one of my funnier moments this year. That was a fun one.
What is your
Nick?
favorite moment since you started your journey with Providence? So not necessarily this season, but since you got on the job, what is the moment that you look back the most fondly of?
I think my favorite moment, there was an overtime goal. This was my first year on the job. What was it? I think it was in February, and it was Jakub Lauko. And right after that goal, Lauko got a shot in the NHL and really saw some big moments for Boston through that centennial year. So I think for me in that moment, it was just the realization that I'm now calling hockey where these guys aren't just fighting for their development, but they're going to go to the NHL and actually be on a national stage. And I get to be a small part of that experience. So just realizing in that moment that it was something bigger than just a broadcast and just really being able, and having that privilege to call at the AHL level and, having the opportunity to just be the voice behind some of these guys', key moments in their development.
Who is the second best play-by-play commentator on this podcast right now?
Second best. Fake, I feel like this is a question just for me to say your name.
It is.
Jesus Christ. No, I gotta go Josh Finkel on this one. He's the best voice of the Chargers.
Okay.
Go roll Chargers. Yeah, that's all I gotta say for that one.
Thanks.
Only
Okay,
because you've never heard play-by-play by either of the two of us. So
Yeah.
That's a true point.
So just so you can talk about a different play-by-play guy that's not Fink, if you could pick one call from Jack or Judd, what is your favorite call of all time that you've heard them say?
I
Because
believe this was
I know my answer. I want to know yours.
my favorite Jack call of all time. I think it was 2016 or 17. Don't quote me on the year. It was Game 7 against Toronto, and it was an overtime goal. It was Bergie, and all of a sudden you just hear Jack go, "The Leafs are mulch again," and I thought that was the most creative, out of pocket call you could ever get in overtime. It wasn't insulting. It wasn't anything. It was just a perfect Jack moment. And I think at that point, I was just like, wow, this is something that is out of the box and defines who Jack really is. And he was just creative. And I think that's one of my favorites from him.
I love that one. And the one for me goes back to 2011, the year they won the Cup. And obviously the year before was the meltdown against Philadelphia. They blew the 3-0 lead. This time they're up 3-0 against Philly. Game 4, Lucic is in on a breakaway with like 4 minutes to go, puts them up 2. And all you hear Jack yell is, "Summertime is coming to Philadelphia." And that, to me, I cried laughing. 13, 14-year-old me just loved that after being gutted the year before. Like it was just like sweet revenge. In that moment, Jack nailed it.
So along that same vein, if you could call a game with any broadcaster, who would you pick?
This is the one moment where I would take a step back from play-by-play and just listen. This would be Mike Emmerich. Mike Emmerich is my favorite announcer of all time, and I have always idoled him just because of the way he has always conducted himself in a professional manner and the sheer vocabulary that he uses. I actually have his spreadsheet of hockey vocabulary with me, and I carry it just as a reminder to always be different in your play calling and to provide a unique spin on your game, because Mike was always, special in that way. But he truly was one of the most humble guys through in and throughout. And I will always say there is nobody like Doc Emmerich in hockey. And when he retired and he stepped away from the mic, it was a serious hole that needed to be filled. And in my opinion, it still hasn't been filled to this day. Kenny and those guys are phenomenal, and I love Kenny Albert. But there is no one like Doc. Nobody.
So, Brett, we've taken up almost an hour of your time on this nice Monday night. So, tell our listeners where we can follow you, where we can see some of your work and some stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Fink. You can always follow me on LinkedIn. My profile is at BC Broadcaster. You can always catch me on YouTube as well through my channel at Brett Chaves. You can also follow all the Providence Bruins games on AHL TV. That's powered by Flow Hockey, Flow Sports. Be sure to check us out there. And then I'm always reposting my stuff on social media, on Twitter, X, at Chaves Brett, on my Instagram at Brett Chaves, and through my Facebook as well. So feel free to follow me on my socials, and lots of P Bruins content still to come.
That's a true professional right there that starts with LinkedIn. That's what I'm
Yes,
fucking
sir.
talking about, Brett.
I was going to say, I think I could speak for Fink and Nate when I say thank you for jumping on this tonight and talking Bruins with us for an hour. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, guys.
I'm gonna go have to go say thank you to Jesse too, because without Jesse, you're probably not here. So.
Oh man, I don't even know what he's doing right now. Hopefully, not getting himself in trouble.
He told me he was gonna come and get on the camera so he could see you, but he never showed up. So that's probably
What a
good
surprise. Ay.
So quickly, let's just go around, guys. Our final thoughts on the Bruins system. Quickly, Nate, you take it.
Yeah, so first off, as I was the only one that didn't get to thank Brett, but thank you, Brett. True Pros Pro. Truly been an honor to talk Bruins with you tonight.
Absolutely.
My closing thought, the thing that I'm going to take away is Stanley Cup run. That's what we're going for.
I like that.
I like that. For me, it's the future isn't as dark as everyone's making it out to be. Like you, Brett, shine a light on the prospect pool that it's maybe not over yet in terms of deep Bruins playoff runs that we've been accustomed to seeing. So I'm leaving this interview a lot more positive than negative that I felt prior to.
I think for me, this was much more of an educational podcast for me. I don't know too much about the AHL Bruins, but now I have a very good understanding. So thank you for that, Brett. And hopefully you can be a reoccurring guest. We definitely would love to have you back on. We're just thrilled to have you on. So that's going to be all from us for tonight, guys. So thanks for joining us. But before we go, you thought you were going to get away from it. You're not. Nate, one last time, let's go through those socials.
100%. I knew you were going to throw it to me, not going to forget. So, of course, that starts on Twitter/X at Boston Banner BP, Boston Banner Blueprint on both Facebook and Instagram, and then Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, Boston Banner Blueprint. Go like, subscribe, follow, rate 5 stars, share with your friends and family, neighbors, anybody you know, broadcasters. Get the word out. Keep growing the platform. Keep interacting with us on socials, and we'll see y'all later this week.
Peace.